Hey guys, and welcome back to the show. I am your host, Megan Hardy, and I am joined today by Dr. Cara from the Chiropractic Health and Wellness Center in Richmond, Virginia. And Dr. Cara is going to share her expertise with us today on functional movement and how we can improve our mobility and performance, whether you range from couch potato to athlete or somewhere in between. That's what Dr. Cara is going to talk with us about today. So, Dr. Cara, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's good to
Yes,
be here.
so glad to have you. So, Dr. Cara, if you would just start out, I always love to ask any of my interviewees just to share a little bit about their backstory, how they got into the space, anything else you feel like is important to share about yourself. But, you know, tell us a little bit about you.
Sure, absolutely. I'm a chiropractor. I decided to become a chiropractor when I was 4. I told my mom that I wanted to be a chiropractor, and she immediately asked me, "How do you know what that is?" So I don't think I
Really?
truly did. Yeah. I don't think I truly did know what it was, but, as you get older, you learn more about it, and it just always seemed so interesting to me that I could help people feel better without the use of medication. So yeah, that kind of set me on my journey.
That's
Um,
amazing. And you don't remember probably as a 4-year-old where you heard of a chiropractor, do you?
who knows?
Who knows?
No one in my family had been to a chiropractor, which was interesting.
Ah, so interesting. And
Yep,
that's amazing because I feel like most 4-year-olds don't actually end up being what they planned on being at 4 year old, at 4 years old.
exactly, exactly.
That's amazing. I'm pretty sure I would have been a veterinarian if I had gone with what I said I would be at 4 years old. So
Yep.
in the
Sometimes
coaching.
you have a little wavering in there. Sometimes you go towards marine biology. I think that was a big one in 6th grade.
Ooh. So cool. I love to like your just approach as far as like, there's a time and a place for medication stuff, but trying to help people get to, optimal health without medication if possible.
Absolutely, absolutely. We can fix so many things with the body with just proper movement.
It's amazing. So good. Well, if you would to start us off, like just tell us a little bit, like our topic today being like functional movement, and just share with us like what is exactly optional function and performance.
So I think of it as the best, most efficient way to move your body, no matter what you're doing, whether that's walking or doing something athletic. It's about injury prevention and efficiency, like I mentioned.
Awesome. Awesome. So, and for that could be a range of things because it's really just optimizing the movement for whoever the person is. But like whether you're just trying to go about your daily activities or like trying to increase your stamina or endurance performance, all of those things.
Absolutely. We
Awesome.
see so many patients who have trouble vacuuming or doing the dishes. So even something as simple as that we do, on a regular basis, moving well is important. So.
So important. And how are you evaluating like someone's strength or if someone comes in the office or how are you evaluating their like mobility and the strength of even like the muscles surrounding a joint?
Yeah, great question. So there are a couple of simple movements that we'll have people do, and it can tell us a lot. There's a lot in those movements. We can test the strength of a muscle around the joint. We can see how flexible a joint is. And something as simple as a squat can really give us a lot of information too.
That's, squats are in my repertoire while in my daily movement. But even that is such a great point too. Is like the squat is like, we think of it oftentimes when we're thinking fitness of it being like a strength exercise, but it's like it's really mobility too, because we're squatting all day long to get up out of a chair, stand up from, get off the toilet.
Absolutely, absolutely. The commode is a big one.
Yeah.
And people people do this thing where they kind of lean forward and kind of press their hands into their legs. But really the proper way is to get towards the edge of the seat and then use your muscle to push up. So that's definitely a way more functional way to get up out of a chair, and it's something that none of us think about.
Oh my gosh, yes, and you saying that and doing that motion, for anyone watching on YouTube, you'll see what she did, but, like, pushing up with your arms to push yourself out of a chair, I can literally, when you did that motion, thought of seeing my grandma do that all the time, like,
Yeah.
that's literally how I, remember her getting out of chairs,
Yep.
So yeah, that functional movement is so important, and actually, while I was in the office, so you guys have worked with me, Dr. Callie was on the show, gosh, a few weeks ago or maybe a couple months ago now, time's flying, but, um, and you guys really helped me through some, like, rib issues I was having, and, but then there was some functional tests I think you guys did too of maybe that was for testing the strength where it was, like, even, like, pushing against you with like, pushing down while you guys resisted me. What were some of those, like, tests or exercises that you do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, so I think Dr. Kelly does applied kinesiology, and that is a little bit different. And I can't really speak to that. I'm not quite as educated as her on that side of things. But when I'm testing a joint, what I'll do is, let's say I'm testing the glute medius muscle. It's a muscle in the hip. It helps to bring the hip outward, and so when I tested, I pushed that muscle down or I pushed that leg down as you bring the leg up. And when you're on your side, we're just testing to see if it is strong. There's also a test to see if it is functional. So I'll have you stand, I'll put my hands on both hips, and then I'll see if one hand drops down as you stand on one leg. So there's a difference between strength and a difference between that and function, essentially.
Ah, gotcha. No, that's so helpful, like, to think of some, examples of some of those, like, strength or functionality tests too.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
That's awesome. Well, what do you see often? Like, what are some common red flags that you see when patients come into the office and, when it comes to, like, muscle strength and functionality?
Sure. Pain is a big red flag. You should not ignore pain. So I would have to say that's probably the biggest one. Another red flag is compensations. So if I'm seeing that someone's, let's use the squat example again. So if I'm seeing someone bending forward with their torso as they're going down into the squat and really relying on those hip flexors, that tells me a little bit of information about what their glutes are not doing and how the glutes are not supporting them or their quads are not supporting them to keep them in that best upright position as they squat down. So I think
Mm.
those would be pain and compensations are the two big red flags that I see.
That's, I love compensation. I feel like it's one of those hidden ones. Like, when people are in pain,
Yeah.
that's how I was when I first found you guys. I was like, "I'm in so much pain with my ribs. I need help." It's
Yeah.
like I was like, "Red flag, red flag." But, but compensation, we may not even notice ourselves.
Absolutely.
Oftentimes. And would that be like what would be some like obviously chiropractic adjustments can help that. And then from like the strength standpoint, what if someone is compensating, and I see some of this with the like work I do with building strength and whatnot, working with clients. But what are you usually suggesting like as far as building strength to help the compensation? Like are you doing like single leg exercises or things like that? Like, how are you, guiding them to help build the strength to correct the
Yeah.
compensation?
A great question again. I feel like it depends on the person, right?
Yeah.
Some people have a lot of difficulty performing an exercise that I ask them to perform. So if that is the case, we find something that will work for the person. And you talked a little bit about compensations and how we're not going to be able to know in our own selves what compensations we're making, and that's absolutely right. I've had so many people come to me saying, I've been doing, I don't know, let's throw out an exercise, clamshells for 1,000 years, and I feel no difference, right? Uh, well, that's because you're not using the muscles that I want you to use during it. You're using some other muscle to make that motion happen, whether that's hamstrings or who the heck knows? I've seen all kinds of crazy things. So, um,
I can imagine. You've seen some crazy things. I know when I came in even, I think it was with Dr. Callie, but like my hips being a little bit off. And it's something I'm not really aware of, but that little
mhm.
bit, but I'm like, actually, if I think back to movements, I'm like, yeah, I do. Like in my squats or something, I'm like, I know which side usually tries to take over or
Yeah,
something. If I'm, if I'm really diligent about paying attention to where that
yeah.
compensation is
It can
happening.
be, yeah, and sometimes we don't know that it's happening. So having someone look at your form or filming your form and kind of seeing if you notice any of those little cues as you're doing whatever it is that you're requesting your body do can be really helpful. Seeing a chiropractor to who does this kind of work, or really just for any joint mobility work. Seeing a personal trainer, a physical therapist. All of these people can be a team for you to try to help you move better.
Yes. So good. We need those people. We all do. And even I love that you mentioned videoing yourself too. That's something I tell my clients. I'm like, one, work with the coach, a chiropractor, like these get these people to help you. Cause having someone else look at you is a different thing too. But I was like, even just videotape yourself and watch yourself back because you'll notice things that
Yep.
otherwise, you may not notice. Even when I go to post content, sometimes I'm like, I'll videotape myself or set my camera up and then I watch it back and I'm like, "Ooh, I gotta redo that. That was bad." I'm like, "I can't share
It's so
that."
funny the things that you don't notice until you physically see it.
Yeah, yes. Oh, so good. Well, what would be some of your suggestions? Let's go start first just with like the couch potato person. I think a lot of people listening to this podcast, just for reference, are people who are probably somewhere in the middle of what we're going to be talking about, like trying to work on a body composition or aesthetic goal, but that everyone might be ranging from like sedentary to a very active person. So, what would be like some of your suggestions for like the person who's kind of that sedentary couch potato who is just like wanting to start moving better.
Absolutely. Start slow. Don't try to go run a marathon after you've been a couch potato for a couple of years. You can do things like stretching. Make sure that you warm up. A slow walk or kind of a mid-paced walk can be a really great warm up. You can do things like body weight exercises, nothing that's going to stress out any of the joints and tendons too much. Um, don't discount the benefit of orthotics. Orthotics are really helpful because everything starts from ground up. So if you don't have a good foundation, it can really affect everything else up the chain. I would say those are the big things. Really, just starting slow. Don't beat yourself up too much, and you can ease into things as you feel more comfortable.
Oh, that's so good. Such great advice because I do feel like a lot of people are like, okay, I'm going to go gung ho from the
Yeah,
beginning. I'm just going to jump right into everything. And actually, I'll be having a podcast coming out soon talking about like, is soreness good or bad? And just talking about what's too sore or, what's pushing it too hard or not pushing it hard enough. And that's the thing is I think a lot of people jump in too quickly and then they actually set themselves back because they're so sore or can't recover or injure themselves because they're jumping in, biting off more than they can
absolutely.
chew.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's
Water is
great.
another
Great
good one.
advice.
Sleep. I mean, all of those things are so vital for getting started on some kind of fitness journey.
Oh, so good. And I loved walking. I'm like, gosh, walking is so underrated. It's the best.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's the best. What about for that person who is, let's go to like swing to the other side of the pendulum. Like, what recommendations are you often giving clients, or would you give to our listeners who are maybe more like athletes, whether that's in like the strength space or maybe that's in the stamina, like running marathon space, but for them to really start. So I know that's broad because those are very different people, but just the athlete who is wanting to start moving better and optimize their performance.
Sometimes it is difficult to have both strength and flexibility, but I would say both of those things are really important. And don't underestimate the value of having someone else look at your form or, like we mentioned, tape your own form, because it can reveal things that you wouldn't have otherwise noticed.
Yes. Oh my gosh, yes. Like I said, I'm like, I'll be the first one to be like, yep, my form looked really bad right there.
Yeah.
I need to redo it.
Yep.
That's something actually with some of my clients who come in and they're a little more advanced. And I'll ask them to send me form checks because all of what I do is online and virtual. So I'll ask them to send me form checks, and I'm like, this is not because I'm belittling you or think you don't know what you're doing, but everyone needs to check their form. Like
Totally. Again, it's
everyone.
about injury prevention and trying to make you move the best way that you possibly can.
Yes. It's yeah, injury prevention. And I'm like, you're gonna get the most bang for your buck if you just are doing you could be not having bad form, but maybe it's not like the best form, which
Right.
you're leaving some on the table.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. That's so good. And then what about last, example or person I'll give. So like swinging back to the middle. And again, this is probably the majority of people listening, but like for the person who is in between, and who is moving consistently, but who that person just like wants their focus is more longevity and strength training, and they're working out consistently for an aesthetic goal, which is many of our listeners. What would be some feedback or just advice or suggestions you would give them?
Sure. Some of the same things, honestly. I would add nutrition, not to discount the benefit of nutrition and talking to a nutritionist or someone who's knowledgeable, or just educating yourself more about nutrition. If you're working more functionally, I would say that aesthetics come naturally. Uh, but things like sleep and water are also so important. Making sure that you're drinking enough and getting enough sleep. So
So
I think
good.
those are all topics that you have already covered in your podcast.
Yes, but it never hurts to like hear them from someone else and to repeat them. Even I mean some of those things that seem so simple, but they're the basics that people ignore.
Yeah,
So it's
we
it's
forget
great to
sometimes because they are so basic to reference them to tell patients or clients that this is something that you need. So
yes, so good. And you mentioned too, and I love that you said if you're focusing on the functional, then the aesthetic often comes with that, right? You said something like that.
yep,
And that's something too that I talk about as far as even strength. It's like when people have aesthetic goals that we can get so hyper focused on the aesthetic that then we end up actually shooting ourselves in the foot or feel defeated or something like that. But if we actually improve our strength and our functional movement, the aesthetic just follows with that,
absolutely,
which is
absolutely.
amazing. Because then we don't have to hyper focus on the aesthetic. We can work on these other tangible outside goals, which are a lot easier to track too. If you're working on your functional mobility and strength, that's much easier to track and actually improve on than just like, oh, I want a better body composition
Yeah,
to
yeah.
work better.
I mean, we can measure things like range of motion, right? That's a solid number that we can measure. We can see, although this does change with hormones, but if you know that you can deadlift 140, and you the next week go up to 160, I mean that's a measurable gain. So there are some measurable things, but it is harder for the aesthetic side of things. So
Yeah.
yeah, like you said, don't beat yourself up over it.
Yes. So good. Well, is there anything else would add or anything I haven't asked you? Any other tidbits or last words of wisdom that you would share with everyone?
I would say to, uh, just if you have concerns, if you think that you could be doing better, if you think you're leaving something else on the table, get assessed by someone. If you think that there are stretches that you need, or if you want to do other strengthening exercises, or you think an exercise is failing for you, get assessed by someone who can help you out,
Mm,
because you never know. You never know what you're leaving on the table.
so true. Oh, and I like that analogy too. Like probably you didn't mean to, no pun intended, but chiropractic, what you're leaving on the table. Ta-da.
I like it. I
Awesome.
like it.
What you're leaving on the chiropractic table.
Uh,
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 Awesome. Well, Dr. Kara, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. Where can everyone find you? what's the best way to reach you guys or get in touch?
Sure. Our phone number is 804-359-6999. Our website is www.chalk.com. You can reach us either way.
Awesome. And I'll put all of that in the show notes so everyone can find you guys there too. But thank you so much for your time. We appreciate you and I hope you have an awesome, awesome day.
Thank you. Have a
You're
good day.
welcome.